Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolutely terrifying, astonishing power of mega tsunamis. We're going to explore a massive paradigm shift in how we build on our coastlines and, really uncover how one single disaster completely flipped our understanding of modern engineering totally on its head.
But hey, before we get into the heavy science, I want you to just picture this. It's the evening of July 9th, 1958. Howard G. Ulrich and his 7-year-old son are anchored in their small boat in Alaska's Lituya Bay. Out of nowhere, a massive earthquake hits. Ulrich wakes up to his boat rocking violently, looks out, and sees this colossal wave forming. He described hearing a ridiculously loud smash at the base of the bay. What he was witnessing was an actual mega tsunami. We're talking a wave that would eventually reach a staggering 1,720 feet high. That firsthand account really sets the stage, doesn't it? It instantly establishes the raw, visceral power of these waves. They're not just big walls of water, they are literally landscape-altering events.
So, this brings us to the core question of our explainer today. If you're an engineer, how in the world do you build for an unstoppable force? How do you protect human life and critical infrastructure when the ocean itself just decides to march over the land? Well, for decades, engineers thought they had it all figured out. But as we'll see, nature has a pretty humbling way of exposing our blind spots.
All right, let's dive into this. Section 1, the concrete building mystery and the 2011 paradigm shift.
You see, before 2011, the general consensus among engineers was that heavy, well-engineered reinforced concrete structures were practically invincible to tsunamis. Then came the Great East Japan Tsunami, a massive magnitude 9.0 earthquake followed by a truly catastrophic wave. Now, take a look at this building in Onagawa. Notice how the structure itself didn't actually crumble into pieces. The walls are mostly intact, you can still clearly see the windows, but the entire massive building is just dramatically tilted on its side, tossed into the debris like it's a child's plastic toy. I mean, seeing this completely shattered those old assumptions. And here are two more examples to really drive this home. On the left, you've got a massive concrete block of a building, just completely ripped from the ground. On the right, it's wild. You can actually see the foundation pilings totally exposed and pointing right up into the air. This specific phenomenon is what engineers call a global stability failure. Basically, it means the building didn't fail because a beam snapped or a wall caved in. Instead, these structures were completely tipped over or dragged as entire rigid bodies, just like a row of dominoes. And up until this exact disaster, this hadn't been recognized as a major failure mechanism for these kinds of massive buildings. So, let's break this down. Section 2, Anatomy of Tsunami Forces, the investigation. To really understand how a wave can just uproot a multi-story concrete building like that, we need to look at the exact physical forces at play when millions of gallons of rushing water slam into a rigid structure. Engineers break these down into 5 distinct categories to make sense of all the chaos. First up, the impulsive force. That's the highly transient, super violent smash when the leading edge of the wave first makes contact. Second is the hydrodynamic force, which is the steady, powerful drag of the rushing water pushing against it. Third, we have hydrostatic force. That's the pressure of the water when it eventually pools and just sits there. Then there's debris impact, forces from cars, boats, or trees acting like giant waterborne missiles. And finally, debris damming. This is where all that random junk piles up against the building, essentially widening its profile so it catches even more of the wave's force. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole dynamic. Think of this free body diagram as our main investigation board. On the left side, you see that blue arrow. That represents the hydrodynamic push. It's the rushing water actively trying to shove the building sideways and tip it right over. Now, to fight back against that, you have the building's effective body weight, represented by the white arrow pointing straight down. That weight pushes the building deep into the soil, creating this absolutely crucial friction at the base to hold it steady. So it's basically a giant tug of war. For decades, the assumption was simple. The sheer weight of reinforced concrete is always going to win that tug of war against the horizontal push of the water. But there was a missing piece to the puzzle. Section 3, the hidden danger of buoyancy. It turns out that horizontal rushing water wasn't acting alone. Not even close. there was a hidden, almost invisible culprit attacking from directly beneath the buildings: the buoyancy force. In geotechnical engineering terms, during a tsunami, this is a massive upward pressure force pushing under the foundation of the building. So here's what happens. As the massive wave rolls over the land, the immense weight of all that water presses down hard on the ground surface. This violently squeezes the groundwater that's already trapped in the soil pores, causing a drastic spike in pore water pressure. And because that pressure has nowhere else to go, it pushes straight up, right against the bottom of the building. It literally lifts the structure, completely wiping out that crucial friction holding it anchored to the ground. But honestly, the most fascinating part of this buoyancy force is that it doesn't happen the very second the wave hits. Look at this timeline, it's wild. First, the initial surge arrives over dry land. Second, all that excess water just sits there, weighing down on the ground surface. Third, because soil isn't perfectly permeable, it actually takes time for those soil pores to slowly pressurize through a process called consolidation. And finally, only after that delay, the buoyancy force fully kicks in and lifts the foundation. This delayed reaction, that's exactly why so many engineering guidelines prior to 2011 completely missed it. And this realization leads us to a massive takeaway that completely changes how we approach coastal engineering. Buildings with basements are actually significantly more resilient to tsunamis. Why? Because the buoyancy force relies on that pressure slowly diffusing deep down into the soil. So, an embedded foundation, like a really deep basement, forces that pressure to travel much, much farther down before it can do any damage. A building resting flat on the surface loses its friction and pops up pretty fast. But a building anchored with a deep basement, that buys precious time. In fact, it often outlasts the absolute worst of the inundation before that upward lift can ever fully activate. Okay, let's look at how we fix this. Section 4, Counterintuitive Engineering Solutions. So knowing all this, how do we pivot and actually save these structures? Well now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual proof of survival we see in Rikuzen, Takata, Japan. The 2011 tsunami essentially wiped away almost every single other building in this area, and the water reached all the way to the top floors of these apartments, and yet they are standing tall. Why is that? Take a really close look at those bottom two floors. They are completely blown out. This is what we kind of call the Trojan horse concept in modern tsunami design. These surviving buildings utilized breakaway walls and large, perfectly aligned windows. Instead of trying to build this massive, solid, impenetrable fortress wall that's forced to take the absolute brute force of the wave, you intentionally design the lower, non-structural walls to just fail instantly. They break away, acting like giant punched holes right through the base of the building. This lets the flow's linear momentum safely bypass the structure, which massively reduces that hydrodynamic push we talked about on the investigation board earlier. But breaking away those walls does something else too, and it reveals the ultimate, real secret to surviving a mega tsunami. Let's compare these two paradigms. On the left, you have the old way, a totally watertight building. Sure, it keeps the inside dry, but it basically turns the building into a giant empty air bubble. As the soil buoyancy pushes up, that watertight building gets lifted, loses its grip, and tips right over. Now look at the right, the new paradigm, a flooded building. By intentionally letting thousands of gallons of water rush inside the structure, you are instantly adding millions of pounds of stabilizing weight right back into your building. That internal water weight pushes down, perfectly neutralizing that dangerous hidden upward lift from the soil buoyancy. It's brilliant. Which really leads us to a profound realization. For centuries, our instinct has always been to build thicker, heavier, watertight walls to try and fight back the sea. But the 2011 tsunami taught us that rigidity can actually be our downfall. By studying those delayed buoyancy effects and embracing things like breakaway walls, we learned a completely counterintuitive truth. So, is fighting nature really our best strategy? Or when faced with an absolutely unstoppable force, is the most resilient thing we can do simply to let it flow through us? It's a massive shift in perspective, and one that is absolutely going to save lives in the coastal cities of the future. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the world around you.